Hello and welcome to Insight Out with Assaad Mohanna. I'm Michael Gaines and glad you are joining us today as we continue our conversation, bringing you insight and perspective from leaders helping shape the world of energy around us and those who are making impact in that space. So glad you're joining us today for another great conversation. We have a very special guest, very honored to have them on the show, and know that you will enjoy it as well. So speaking of enjoying, I want to bring in Shelby Demain to talk about some of the things that we enjoy, including getting some feedback and insight from you, the viewers. Hey, Shelby.
Hey, Michael. Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the things that I love best about this show is that we get to hear from our audience every single week. We get to get as many of those questions answered as we can in the time we have. And so I look forward to hearing more comments. So if you have a question at any point for Assaad, for our special guest, or even for Michael, I'm going to put him on the spot too. You can go ahead and ask those questions in the comment section below, whether you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. I'm in the comments throughout the entire show, reading everything, checking out what you're saying, and we're going to get to as many as we can. And another thing is, if you have a question at any point, it doesn't have to just be at the end. You can ask it, and we might pull it up right there in that conversation if it has to do with what we're talking about. So feel free, if you think of something, go ahead and comment it. And then if you want to reach out to us after the show, the way to do that is actually you can message Assaad himself on LinkedIn. So you can find his profile. He's also tagged in the post. So you can go there. You can send him a quick message. If maybe you have an idea for something you'd like to hear on a future episode, maybe a guest who you'd like us to have on the show, or even a question about a past episode. And that'll be the way to get those questions answered after we're live. But again, if you have a question now, just go ahead and ask it below. Like I said, we're going to get to as many as we can today.
All right. Thanks, Shelby. Yeah. And so part of our show today also includes a segment after our main conversation called the After Show. And that's where we have the opportunity to ask a few more questions and have a bit more of a casual conversation with Assaad and our guest. So look forward to seeing you there. And again, that'll be immediately following our main segment here. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump in and bring in NOV's resident expert himself, Assaad Mohanna, NOV's Director of Business Strategy. Happy almost February to you, Assaad. I'm not going to rush January, but good to see you.
Good to see you, Michael. We're almost there. We're almost in February for sure.
Yeah. So it says time waits for no one. So apparently hasn't waited for me either, because I almost missed it. But here we are, and another week down in the beginning of 2021 here, and of course had a lot of happenings going on, of course in the broader scheme. But I know that you've had your eye on a few items that happened over the last week or so.
That's right, Michael. Well, it was the first week of a new administration, so that cannot go without any action. I think for a first week in a new administration in the U.S., it's been a pretty busy one, in fact, with quite a bit that the Biden administration's issued in terms of executive orders. A couple really brought some attention to our industry, namely the recent ban of issuing new permits in federal land, and the other ones about the Keystone XL reversal of the decision or the project to go forward. And I'll talk a little bit about each, starting with the ban. It started off with literally one of the first things that the new president did is to suspend any new leases from being issued in federal lands for 60 days, and soon after that turned into a full suspension. The impact of that, the way we kind of see it, and the way the analysts are seeing that, kind of on the medium or short term, not having too much of an impact, although the market has reacted negatively to the news. Just because, if you remember in 2020, and we mentioned that a couple of times as this topic came up, operators that had land in primarily the Delaware Basin, which is the one that's mostly affected by the ban, and mostly in the New Mexico state, or part of the Delaware Basin, noting that Texas does not have any federal land that's being affected by that. So those operators went out and maxed out on permits. So they went, some of them increased their average application by about 250% from what they typically did in a normal year, giving them enough inventory of land and federal land to drill for the next maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years. So that kind of tells you that in the short term, there's not much to worry about. Longer term, things will kind of transpire and evolve, and we'll see how that develops. Now, on the Keystone XL project, again, a reversal on what had already been given the green light. But going back to previous administrations, Keystone's been given the red light to carry forward. And that means negative repercussions for transmission of Canadian crude, primarily tar sands, to the Gulf Coast. But I think Alberta has some options still. I think they're evaluating a couple of other pipelines that are in discussion. One is the Trans Mountain pipeline. The other is Line 3, which was recently awarded, which tells you there are still options for Canada to proceed forward.
All right. Well, sounds like, to your point, a lot of things happening, and we'll continue to keep an eye on those developments. So, of course, speaking of Canada, I think that's a great segue to introduce our guest today. We have the pleasure of having Mr. Kevin Neveu join us today. So, Kevin is the president, CEO, and a director at Precision Drilling Corporation. So previously, Kevin held senior management roles at NOV in London, Moscow, Houston, Edmonton, and Calgary. He's a past chairman of the International Association of Drilling Contractors and an advisory to the University of Calgary's School of Public Policy. So Mr. Neveu holds a Bachelor of Science degree in mechanical engineering and is a professional engineer registered in the province of Alberta. So we are very honored to have you join us today, Kevin. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thank you, Michael and Assaad, for hosting and for having us on today. Thank you.
We're glad to have you. And as I'd like to do, I want to let Assaad go ahead and dive in here. I've learned 2020 was a year of resolution, so I've resolved to be more gracious and allow others to go ahead of me. So, Assaad, go ahead.
Very nice of you, Michael. Thank you. And Kevin, so nice to have you on the show. Usually I know we'd be having this sort of meetings in person, maybe just because we're across the street neighbors here in Houston. But I see you're joining us from the capital of Alberta today.
Well, not quite the capital, but you could call it the energy capital of Alberta. I was in Houston last week, actually, and came back to Calgary this week. Was planning to head down again in a couple of weeks' time. It just depends on how complicated our two governments, Canadian government, U.S. government, make border crossings. Certainly in the current state, that's becoming more challenging.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it hasn't been an easy ride or easy year for you. Kevin, I want to start off with a question that really relates on the industry as a whole. It's been a tough year for drilling contractors in general, more predominantly, I think, offshore drillers. We've seen 2020, many great companies really struggle in servicing their debt. We've seen several Chapter 11s. We've also seen lots of consolidation in the E&P world. Again, some great companies having to find other companies to join in. Lots of financial restructuring, but that hasn't been the case for onshore drillers. What's your take on that?
You know, the onshore drilling space has been amazingly resilient for a very long time now. You really have to go back to the early 1980s when this industry was really on its knees for an extended period. But you know, the drillers you have today, the top 4 or 5 drillers in the U.S. and the top drillers in Canada, were really all products of that 1980s collapse. And we built strong companies. They're able to survive through downturns, short and long. Some of us, my company included, came into this downturn with a little more debt than we'd like. but not too much debt that we can't manage our way through it. And I think we've shown over the past certainly past 12 months, but even going back to 2014, how we've managed the cycles quite well.
Yeah, so it seems like not just precision drilling, but what I'm hearing is that there was a discipline all along for the last several decades, moving in and building a more robust structure that withstands these cyclical environments.
Yeah, so no question. I mean, the industry in the U.S. particularly was essentially fully rebuilt from about 2007 through 2015. So most of us drillers invested billions of dollars in new high technology rigs. Those were almost always covered by customer long-term contracts. So as the rigs were being built and delivered to the market, we put those rigs to work under long-term contracts, so that when the downturn finally hit, we'd essentially recover the original investment of that rig. And these are long life assets. These rigs will last us another 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
So we can afford to run through a year or two of off cycle, but be ready for the next return cycle to hopefully make back a better return again.
Yeah, that's right. And I think what's really painful for an offshore rig, kind of stacking that, whether cold or warm or smart stacked, that costs a lot more than stacking a land rig.
Well, yeah, our rigs aren't parked on saltwater. Our rigs are parked usually, in places like Midland, Texas, or Oklahoma, or even up in Canada. They're parked in places where we don't have a lot of corrosion. Yeah, there is some degradation of the asset quality, but not a lot.
Yeah.
We can reactivate a rig after several years of being down, really for just maybe a couple $100,000 of reactivation costs. So that combined with the variable cost nature of our business, which allows us to ramp down our costs in a downturn and then build things back up again in a rebound, really helps us mitigate the volatility we see. Especially this last year, which was just incredible with the oil price war and then the COVID-19 crisis and rig counts collapsing, not just in the U.S., but Canada and internationally.
It's been quite the year.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, I wanted to follow up with you. So, we've been talking about rigs, and obviously those are assets that you're constantly keeping an eye on, especially, when you're looking at technology, the people, safety, culture, across the board. And of course, the well construction process is going to hinge on the performance that's going to be delivered through both the technology and the people. So how do you deliver value when you're looking as a drilling contractor to customers, especially when you're looking at the differentiators that you feel kind of set you apart in that space?
Michael, ultimately we deliver value really two ways on the rig. Part of it is the price we charge, or a day rate that we charge for the rig. And, some drilling contractors will focus on kind of a low price, high volume model. We focus more on total wellbore cost and the technology we can bring into play, how quickly and efficiently and safely we can drill the well. We think that creates, a value combination for especially, safety conscious E&P companies, full cycle cost conscious companies, a value combination with, high quality asset, well-trained crews, and I'd say probably modestly higher pricing, but obviously better efficiency and better performance. That is a compelling value proposition for our customers.
Yeah. And do you find that that still holds true, as those kind of your core pillars, despite the volatility that you find, that we've had in 2020 and past years?
Certainly if you look at the first half of 2020, when most of our customers were looking at how to just shut down spending, how to stop spending, and they were just focused on things like terminating contracts and laying rigs down. I would say that value propositions are a lot less important in a sharp decline. But as soon as the market settles, as soon as you get to bottom and you start to see activity come off bottom, our customers are usually then looking for the best efficiency, the best safety, the best value, best total cycle cost. And that's where our value proposition starts to really make sense, especially in the early stages of recovery.
Okay. No, yeah, that makes sense. So I know that, one of the, and I don't want to steal Assaad's thunder, but I know that one of the things that we've talked about recently has really revolved around digital transformation. As a matter of fact, I know. Oh yeah, there you are. So Assaad, I know that you've talked about that. We've talked about that both together and with past guests about what that looks like in the marketing industry.
Yeah,
Well, go ahead.
I was gonna echo on Michael's question. Sort of what the digital transition. We talk about energy transition. There still is a digital transition throughout the industry. Curious to see how that's changed your world.
Well, we're kind of experiencing that right now on this call today because we're doing this electronically with, three people in three different places communicating like we're in the same room.
Yep.
So, digital transformation is kind of weaving through our lives and our drilling industry in every possible way. 2.5 years ago, we installed a new company-wide cloud-based ERP system. So all of our financial and operating and contractual data no longer resides inside Precision; it resides in the cloud. It's more efficient. We can distribute the information globally faster. But we're doing the same thing now with our rigs. So we began a high technology push for digitization going back almost 4 years in our rigs. We put the NOV Novos automation system on our rigs. We coupled that with Precision's training and systems and developed something we call and brand Alpha Automation. We put apps on that system to improve the drilling performance and make the rigs drill arguably faster and more repeatable, less human variance and human risk, yet still leveraging the quality of the trained workers on the rig. And now we're looking at streaming all of the real-time data from the rig. And we're talking about 4,000 data channels operating at about 5 hertz. So that's a huge amount of volume streaming from the rig through an edge server to the cloud, analyzing that data, and then making recommendations and improvements to improve the drilling performance. So there's no question the transition from, call it analog drilling to digital drilling, we're in the middle of it right now. And I'd argue that within 4 or 5 years, essentially every rig will be drilling with full automation and full digital analytics and high-speed data capability.
Yeah, and I think first I want to thank you for the alliance and partnership we have with Neveu. I think with Novos particularly, we've had with Precision Drilling some great stories to tell. The challenge out there, Kevin's been looking at the ROI. How do you see that from investing in digital transformation as a whole?
Well, you mentioned the alliance that we have with NOV on Novos, and I can tell you that if Precision had decided to develop the software internally by ourselves, we would have had a very tough time hitting the ROI hurdles over a period of time. So it's a long-term investment. It takes a high degree of competency in code writing and then debugging and then field implementation. So we think that by spreading out the investment and spreading out the capabilities between NOV and Precision and then partnering on the technology to apply it in the field and deploy it to the field has been a very successful combination. So in fact, NOV has the code writing and algorithm skills. Precision has the field implementation skills and the deployment and training at the field level. So as a result, I think today we've got 40 systems in our fleet. All of the systems are running, and I think in Q4, I think we recorded an average uptime of 99.8%.
Oh wow!
And had a number of days in a row they're 100% uptime with the software. And for any software, even an IBM PC, talking about 100% uptime over weeks is an incredible performance. So we've been able to achieve that with Alpha Automation using the Novos engine.
That's amazing. That's great to hear. I think there's an example there to be given on how alliances can be successful and how trust plays a big role in that success.
Assaad, I think when you're developing new technology and it starts with equipment and then software and then field deployment and rig hands and customers, you really have to partner because you've got to be able to work together through some of the stumbling blocks. And, no question, in our early days getting Novos on the rigs, when we were getting, 15, 20% uptime, working with NOV on hardening the software, I don't call it debugging, but hardening the software, making it function reliably, predictably, was a joint effort. Both companies committed to it, and we rode together through a lot of those potholes in the early part of the field deployment.
That's amazing insight.
So I want to just jump in real quick. So if you just joined us, we are talking to Kevin Neveu. He's the president and CEO and a director at Precision Drilling Corporation. So if you have a question for Kevin or Assaad, or I'll reluctantly say even myself, feel free to put your question in the chat box there, whether you're watching us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, and we will try to get to your question. We see that there's several starting to come in now, so definitely want to be able to get to those in the show today. So yeah, I actually want to jump back in towards you, Kevin. So any longtime viewers of the show will know one of the things Assaad and I love to talk about are business models. And so one of the ones that I've just really taken a fascination to in recent years is really looking at the day rate model. And so always just kind of curious perspectives in that space. And so I want to pose a question to you. Do you feel that the day rate model is going to be something that we continue to have, or do you suspect that there will be a shift in the overall models that are in the industry?
Well, so I think the day rate model goes through points in time in the cycle when it works quite well, and other points in time in the cycle when it doesn't work very well. And certainly when you've got the tail end of a 70% collapse in demand, you've got significant oversupply and pretty aggressive market competition, I think the day rate model definitely comes under duress. And on top of that, I'd say that there's a strong desire, certainly in the procurement teams of our customers right now, to see some kind of a pay for performance or reward type model. So certainly in 2020, we saw the reemergence of the pay for performance or performance-based contracts. Percentage of our contracts are those types right now. But I think if you look across the industry, probably somewhere in the 15 to 30% range of all drilling contracts are some pay for performance type model. Now, we're kind of achieving some of the same thing using our new technology initiatives in that we price the rig at what I call a competitive level for the base rig, but then we charge an a la carte price on top of that for our automation and for our apps. So generally, if the automation or apps delivers value, our customers will pay for it. So if they see an improved performance, they'll pay for the added automation, they'll pay for the added apps. If they don't realize the value that we offer or that we believe is there, they'll stop paying for them. So in some ways, our a la carte pricing model for our technology and for our apps and for automation is a bit of a pay for performance model in itself. But I'll tell you, for the entire history of the business, if rigs don't perform as the customer expects, they get laid down and replaced by better rigs. So there's no question that performance is always going to be important in the drilling space, both land and offshore. Going back to the pricing model just for a second, I think the pricing model works very well when the market's growing and rigs are being added, because our customers have, for the last 25 years, been willing to sign long-term contracts based on day rates. Those day rates are generally adequate to return the capital we invest in the rig. So I think there's a point in time, certainly in the new build cycles, when the day rate model works very, very well.
Kevin, are you still depreciating rigs over the lifetime of the rig, or is it contract based?
No, we follow IFRS accounting standards, which are much like US GAAP, in that we use a straight line depreciation model for various assets on the rigs. Certain assets have shorter lives, other assets have longer lives. The entire rig would have a depreciation schedule probably around 15 years.
Sure.
But of course, the rig will last a little bit longer, probably somewhere between 18 and 25-year life. So there's a little bit of a mismatch there, but I think the accounting is correct.
Interesting insight on the day rate model and how you kind of pile up the a la carte technology where it fits and it brings value. They'll pay for it. If it doesn't, then it just doesn't get added in.
That's right. And then we don't turn it on.
Yeah, you just don't switch it on. That's right. Yeah.
Now, what I will say is that on our website we've got numbers of case studies right now showing the value we're providing with both with automation and with various sets of apps we've been using. And I think that over the course of 2019 and then into 2020, we've proved on thousands of wells that automation, digitization, apps brings real value to our customers.
Right.
Now, what's interesting is there can be field level resistance, because generally the drilling engineer's job or the company man on location, their job is to make sure that well is being drilled as quickly and efficiently as possible. And if the app can do the same thing or the automation can do the same thing, sometimes those field personnel or drilling engineers feel like they're being marginalized, and they at times tend to resist this technology shift. So we have to work hard to to train both the engineers and the company engineers, the company representatives on site, to become advocates for the technology and actually helping drive this technology push in digitization. And what we find is that once they become the champion of technology, we very quickly move to bring on more apps, more efficiency, more performance for our customer, and they look really good.
And you start being looked at as the value provider rather than just bringing a rig to location that can drill well.
Yeah, I think honestly, we're always viewed as a value provider. There can be points in the cycle where sometimes it's more price sensitive, other times it's more performance sensitive. But in today's world, where safety and ESG and performance and even just rig site cleanliness are critical, there's no question we're an important part of the value cog for our customers.
Sure. If I read Shelby's mind properly, oh, there she is.
Here I am. Yep. You guessed it. I have an audience question already. So Juan on LinkedIn was wondering, does precision drilling have a strategy to lower emissions and operating costs?
Well, yeah, we actually do. And it's through a variety of methods, but I'd say the most important method is if we can drill wells faster and use less energy, whether that energy is diesel fuel or highline power, battery power, or natural gas, if we can use less energy, that's probably the simplest, fastest way for us to reduce emissions. So I can tell you most of what we've done over the past decade has been to drill wells faster using less energy. As we go forward, continuing to move down the carbon chain is important. Looking at solutions that either reduce diesel burn or convert diesel engines to natural gas engines or blend in some natural gas, and even moving to highline power and potentially hybrid power systems or even potentially fuel cell solutions are all on our agenda to look at and begin working on, certainly last few years and into 2021 and 2022.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We have another one here from a user on LinkedIn. They're wondering, is Precision implementing any safety critical element systems associated with maybe maintenance or integrity?
So I can tell you that our equipment maintenance procedures and policies are linked in with our quality management system and our safety management system. They're all interlocking. So essentially, everything we do, whether it's a maintenance procedure, design procedure, or an operating procedure, are all overseen to ensure that the operations remain safe. We keep our people protected. They stay out of the line of fire. It is an inherently risky environment. So you're continually developing both processes, systems, procedures, and then oversight and engineering solutions to ensure you keep our people safe. And it's, we've just come off in 2020, by far our best safety performance year ever. We hope to improve again in 2021.
That's great. That's good. Good practice, good performance, good attention to safety. I think the natural next topic for us to talk about is energy transition. I know, Kevin, you've had, as a company, experience with geothermal. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
It's interesting, Assaad. I think we're in energy transition and have been in energy transition for a couple hundred years. We started off with fire for about 10,000 years, and then we moved into essentially whale oil and then crude oil. And now we're transitioning to lower carbon sources like natural gas, wind power, solar power. And wind and solar aren't new. They've been around for decades now. You mentioned geothermal. I think Precision drilled its first geothermal well. I don't remember the exact date. It was either 28 or 32 years ago. And we drilled more geothermal wells even as recently as last year. So, I think that the land drillers will play a role in geothermal drilling as it goes forward. I think we'll be an important part of the energy transition. But I also think that we're an important part of our customers, the oil and gas companies, lowering their footprint. And as I discussed earlier, as we move down the carbon chain and move down the emissions chain, we're helping our customers become carbon zero or carbon dioxide zero. And I think we're an important part of that transition, but I think we'll also be an important part of the move towards geothermal drilling as that develops.
I think what I'm hearing from you, Kevin, I think over and over is collaboration is key in any of these initiatives, whether it's the digital transformation or it's energy transition or it's the collaboration for better performance or safety. you can't but get closer to your customer and your suppliers and bring that supply chain or the value chain all closer together to squeeze that value out.
Assaad, it's as you asked the question, I started thinking to myself about two parts. So I would tell you that competition is really important, and competition drives most of what we do, but collaboration is equally important. So what I don't want to do is compete with my customers or compete with my vendors. I want to collaborate with my customers, collaborate with my vendors. I want to compete with my competitors head to head, and I want to prove that we can do a better job. But I think that if we have a strong partnered supply chain and a strong customer base who also are part of that value chain, and we're actually welded together as part of the value chain, we're likely to be more successful. Certainly we will be, and certainly our customer will be, but we think we also pull our suppliers in. So we think that that collaborating both suppliers and customers ends up being a strong competitive advantage.
That's right.
So Kevin, I wanted to maybe follow up on a comment that you made earlier, actually, and it was one of the questions that was posed by one of the viewers. Really talking about as a drilling contractor, your perspective on your environmental footprint. And I'm just kind of curious. I know you answered that question, very directly, but I'm curious, maybe more broadly, how you kind of see that, and maybe the thoughts moving forward.
Well, let me go back a little bit in precision's history. So back in the early 1990s in Western Canada, shallow gas drilling small shallow gas wells became a huge industry in Western Canada. A lot of these gas wells were in the middle of farmers' fields. So Precision developed a rig called a super singles rig. And this is a really small, quick moving, compact footprint. And in fact, we operated on locations called zero disturbance. And the idea was you'd go into the location, you'd actually pat down the hay, you'd bring the rig in very carefully, you'd drill the well, you'd have a very small operating footprint, you'd fence off the well, the rig would leave. And when that rig left, all that was left was about a 3 meter by 3 meter wellhead enclosed, and the land was essentially untouched, and the hay would grow back. So that was 1992 that we developed that rig. So, we can go back in Precision almost 30 years to a very strong, low environmental footprint operation. We grew our market share in that particular business to almost 50% for a while. Let's come back a little bit from that, but we're a very strong player, being a first mover in called zero disturbance drilling. And now as we look at alternative power sources and lower footprint and lower environmental footprint in general, we think that we're still remaining a first mover and able to drive market share by helping be part of our environmental solution for our customers.
Yes, I think that rings really well with what you said earlier about the role drilling contractors can play and just being innovative with technology and kind of taking the lead on making that change. Energy transition is not new. ESG is not new. It's responsibility towards the environment.
No, I think what is new, though, is the investor focus on it. So the investors are certainly focused on ESG. They're investing in ESG. And I think our industry hasn't really done a great job promoting the steps we've taken around ESG in general. But certainly I can tell you, whether it's super majors, intermediates, or small oil companies, service companies, we get it now. And you'll watch over the years 21, 22, there'll be a very strong push demonstrating the performance industry has delivered. Certainly our company has, but I know many, many others have too.
Kevin, how concerned are you that some of your peers, maybe not necessarily onshore drilling, but some of the offshore drillers that could get into this space are a lot less debt heavy now that they've exited financial restructuring, less debt to service? And how important is that financial restructuring in your world right now? Well,
so I don't see it being a huge issue in land drilling. I mean, certainly, as I said earlier, Precision has a little more debt than we like. We're making great progress paying it down and expect to be in the range we'd like to be in over the next couple of years. So I don't think it's company changing for us. There probably isn't going to be a huge land build drilling cycle, at least for half a decade. So, the near-term need for new capital for land drillers isn't as important as it might be in other areas. Now, if you've got an offshore drilling fleet that's rusting and aging, and you're retiring big portions of that fleet, you're going to have to get new capital soon to start to rebuild that fleet. And I think, accessing new capital will be important for the offshore business, probably sooner than land business. So getting restructured, getting the debt sorted out, and then working their way back to regain access to capital is going to be very important for offshore. But I'll also tell you, this is a capital-intensive industry, land, offshore, for our customers. For all of us, having access to capital, I think, long-term is important. So obviously, getting our debt levels down, making ourselves more investor-friendly, and able to access that capital, be it debt or equity, in the future is going to be important for us.
Right. I want to push that maybe a little bit, Kevin, on the discipline that your customers are having because of that capital competitiveness. With operators committing to a lot less capex than we'd like, a lot less wells being drilled in the next at least year, maybe two. How do you feel? I don't think anybody's actions to go back into drilling very heavily anytime soon. How are you going to base your business on that?
Assaad, so for Precision, this is a very good time in that we have lots of our super spec rigs, our super triples right now that are available. We have about 40 super triples in the US that are available. We've got a handful in Canada that are available. So we can almost double our US, in fact, almost triple our US activity right now by gaining share, by deploying our super spec rigs. And our customers right now are going to have constrained drilling programs, but they're going to also have very focused programs trying to maximize their efficiency, trying to get as many wells drilled as quickly and efficiently as they can. There'll be larger pad sizes, things like alpha automation using Novos and our apps will play a more important role. So we think this is a good opportunity for us to gain market share during this very constrained environment. But I'd also tell you, I think it's really important that our industry regains investor confidence. And that discipline is a critical element in getting back investor confidence, both for the E&P operators and for the drillers. So I think that several quarters, several months, several years of good demonstrated fiscal discipline is it's necessary, it's important, and we're going to be delivering that. I think the land drillers have been disciplined now for several years. We'll continue being disciplined into the future, and that'll help attract capital to our space.
I have an audience question that we just got. So, it's kind of a long one, but Abraham on LinkedIn mentioned that, with everything that happened with COVID in the last year, it forced a lot of industries to kind of adopt digital aspects and digital technologies a little bit quicker than maybe they had planned. But how do you see technologies like artificial intelligence or machine learning having an effect on midstream drilling and different markets like that for oil and gas?
Well, I think that's a great question, and it's complicated. I did mention earlier that we're currently right now monitoring 4,000 data channels, and at 5 hertz frequency. So we're already in the big data game. It's far too complex and happens too fast to have a lot of human calculations going on. So we need machine learning. We need big data work on the drilling data that we're generating already around the drilling machine itself, let alone the geological information we're generating. So I think there's a huge opportunity to further fine-tune, improve our performance, improve well placement by analyzing the data we have, by using big data analytics, and then machine learning. And I think AI will play a role in that as we continue to expand our data fields.
That's definitely attestation to all the work that Precision Drilling has been doing in that space. I want to maybe circle back to our conversation on investor behavior, Kevin. And speaking of growth versus returns, that's been a big change in investor discipline or desire from their target customers. What can you speak to that?
So, Assaad, I think it's fairly long-term investor theory was that oil demand was always going to grow. So therefore, if you could find good companies inside a long-term growing oil demand, and you found good companies inside there that you could invest in, those companies would grow with the oil demand. And if they were good, they'd grow even faster than oil demand. And then the service companies that were good service companies would grow even faster than those companies. So there was a long-term theory that investing in oil was a growth area. You had companies that could grow faster, so it was a good investment. And if you could find service companies, they'd be even better investments. And certainly in 2020, we've seen oil demand actually go down for a short time. There are a lot of question marks around long-term oil demand growth. So I think the investors have said, okay, we don't see near-term growth in oil. We need to see returns. They need to see financial returns. We're not going to pay premiums for growth anymore. We're going to pay those companies a return capital through share buybacks, through dividends, through reducing debt. So that's where the investor attention's gone. But as an industry, we were labeled as a growth industry, and we're having to build a reputation now for being a returns-based industry. So I think if we can do that, we can reattract those investors. There may be at some point in time when demand starts to grow again. I think it will. I don't think we're finished with hydrocarbons in 2021. I think those demand will grow when the world gets back going. The market may view us as a growth industry again for a period of time, and I think the companies will pivot. But I think it'll pivot after the market decides that we're growth oriented.
And to your point, I think there are some out there that believe that operators will come back from the downturn without any particular production discipline or optimized field development, as they've called it. Or some operators have come out and said they'll adopt. On which side of the coin are you?
I'm on the side of the coin that says that most of us CEOs need access to capital long term, and we have to satisfy the capital markets.
Yeah.
The capital markets in general right now are certainly rewarding return. If you can find a way to give some growth in return, you'll even get a better reward. So if you can somehow provide solid, strong financial returns and show some growth, that seems to be the best combination right now. And the market doesn't seem to be anxious to see rapid growth, because the risk that comes with that right now is just a bit too high for investors. But Assaad, I don't think the companies, oil and gas or service companies, will get ahead of the investors here. I think we will respond to what the markets want.
Yeah. And maybe one concluding question for me, at least, maybe more for Michael. If you were to project the remainder part of the downturn, what do you forecast is coming next for our industry?
Well, I think we have to see the COVID virus in our rear view mirror. I think we have to see the economies open up. We have to see people getting back to work, whatever that work model looks like, some mixture of working from home, working from the office. That new environment has to settle down. I think people have pent up demand to travel, so I think air travel rebounds quickly. I do expect that hydrocarbon energy, which is still the largest energy source globally and certainly in the US and other parts of the world, will rebound. I think demand will get back on a rising curve while we continue to work on the energy transition, which will be a long-term transition. But I do see, if the vaccines work well in 2021, I think 2022 could be a very strong demand growth year for oil and gas, which should be excellent for our sector.
We certainly hope for things to get better here soon for our industry.
I think 7.5 billion people all agree on that.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Well, this has been really, really interesting, and I know that you're committed to continuing to serve your customers and your team there, Kevin. So appreciate you carving out some time for us to share perspective from precision drilling. So for those that joined us a little bit later, again, we had the opportunity to have our guest today, Kevin Neveu, the president and CEO of Precision Drilling. So we are going to wrap up the main segment here, but we're going to jump right into our after show, where we're able to continue and kind of have some bonus content and conversation there. So Kevin, appreciate you joining us, and Assaad, as always, thanks for leading us through, and we will wrap up this part of the convo, but we'll jump into the after show right now.
Great, thank you.
All right, so we're in the after show. So great conversation. Thanks, Kevin, and our production team. So Paul and Kamal, Shelby, and Assaad. So if you're joining us now, we know we're still rolling, so don't freak out. We won't. But this is part of our show where we all just kind of come out and continue our conversation, but have a little more insight and combo.
I actually have a question. So I always ask other people's questions, but I actually have a question that I have that I'd like to ask. Although I'm happy to ask other people's. I should watch my connotation there. But I'm curious. So I think a common trait of CEOs and all, across industry and different companies is that a certain energy, a certain drive for what you do. And so I'm curious, what is there anything that you do that energizes you or kind of gets you ready on the day to day? I think I've heard CEOs sometimes talk about like meditation or, some kind of morning ritual, or it can be morning or any time of day. But I'm curious if you have any advice for kind of how to stay energized every day.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't actually think about how to stay energized. I seem to wake up feeling pretty good about moving days. But I will tell you, I use the drive to work. And I use that drive to work, and I like a 20 to 30-minute drive to work. In Houston, it's usually more like 45 minutes or an hour. Here in Calgary, the way the current deployment is, it's about 15 minutes. But I use that drive to work to really set myself up for the day. And I remind myself a few things about myself. I try to remind myself that I need to listen to my people and not always be right and not always have all the answers. So I try to get myself in the right framework for the day. And so when I get to the office, I'm kind of ready to go and ready to listen and ready to talk to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that bodes well for me then, because I was one of those people that when we first had gone to at home working and I lost that commute, I was like, that turned out to be one of my favorite parts of the day. So I agree with you. That's good to hear.
Yeah, at Precision, we certainly went to a work remote model, but most of the senior leadership and kind of the key positions that have real interactive jobs are still coming into the office. I've worked a few days from at home, and I've had a real struggle with that motivation. I miss that drive to work, and boy, I should miss the interaction with other people. And while this is okay, it's not quite the same as having a coffee with somebody, and we all know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and to Shelby, I had some similar thoughts, and so kind of the flip of that. Do you ever intentionally do nothing, like on the weekend? Do you wash the dishes? Do you go and just sit out in the backyard and just stare at something? Because it's got to be a hectic, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, or whatever it is, as a CEO. But like, do you ever have to focus on doing nothing?
So I'll tell you a quick story. I actually had a walk on the weekend with a retired ex-NOV employee who's been retired now for a few years. In fact, I think he was about a 32-year NOV employee. His comment to me was actually kind of fun. He said he didn't realize that he didn't have to rush all the time until he retired.
Mm.
And he said it's really nice having time to just contemplate and really time to relax. And, he's an active skier. He doesn't have to race to the ski hill on a Saturday morning. He'd go skiing on Tuesday afternoon. I hadn't thought about it until he put it in those terms. Yep. But it feels like as a CEO, your job's pretty busy. You've got a lot going on. You're usually thinking about work from the time you wake up until you fall asleep again at night, if you fall asleep. There really isn't a lot of time to be contemplative.
Mm-hmm. What about reading? What's the last good book you read?
So a lot of my colleagues read business books and, kind of current trends. I like fiction. If I do read, I usually read maybe half an hour a day. But I do two types of reading. I'll read as much current news in the morning as I can, both from all of the social sources and public sources, analysts, everything. I'll read as much as I can about the industry in the morning. In the evening, I like to read a little bit of fiction and any kind of fiction just to take my mind off the day and hopefully fall asleep if I can.
Yeah.
Do you listen to podcasts?
Yeah. Are you more of a sorry, I didn't hear you.
No, go on. Do you listen to any podcasts? And if you do, which ones are your favorite?
So I'm starting to listen more to more podcasts, and I've been listening to a few of the ones that are published in the industry. This one's on my list, and I'll pick up a few more. Some of the analysts, research companies that do podcasts. Mm-hmm. I do find though that I can usually read and get the same information in my morning kind of press briefings that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Do you miss traveling, Kevin?
My wife commented the other day that she hadn't heard me say, "I hate packing." And I've been traveling for the better part of 30 years. And I got to the point where I really got tired of packing a suitcase, waiting in line at the airport, struggling through all the security checks. Yeah. So about a year ago, I was getting kind of tired of traveling, but I can tell you that certainly probably by about June, I was missing traveling, and now I'm missing it desperately.
Oh, there it is. Well, they say, be careful what you wish for, because if anything, if this current market has been a compression, the spring is going to release, and maybe that bag won't be unpacked for a while. Who knows?
I do expect that the vaccine is going to work. I do think we'll get back to traveling, and I think that those companies and those jobs and those roles where you need to be face to face with people, we're going to go through kind of a overload now. We'll be probably doing more traveling shortly after things open up. Certainly, I'll be wanting to get in front of customers, wanting to get in front of investors, and when it's safe, see them face to face and kind of rebuild those relationships that I think are holding together, but they're fraying a little bit with time.
It's got a different taste, for sure.
Yeah, certainly. I look forward to having a coffee with Assaad face to face at some point in time.
We're going to have to do that.
I do too. I'm waiting for my coffee with Assaad invite as well. So we might have to arm wrestle for that one. I don't know.
Michael, does he typically buy, or do I have to buy?
Well, no, Assaad is a very generous guy. I'll tell you another story. We had a lunch, and I went out and grabbed lunch, and I called Assaad. He's like, "Hey, Assaad, I'm coming back for the show. I've got lunch." He's like, "Michael, you didn't offer to get me lunch?" I was like, "Oh no!" It's like, what kind of person am I? So since then, it's like, I should call him in the morning. Assaad, I'm making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Do you want one? Like, I'll make you one.
Yeah. He's been paying for my lunch for.
I'm trying to dig myself out of that one. That's okay.
Yeah, certainly looking forward to those days.
Yeah.
Kevin, you've shifted. I mean, being with an OEM to a drilling contractor, that's a significant step in somebody's change in career. Still the same industry, but I'm pretty sure while there are many similarities, there's definitely lots of changes. How's that changed on you?
Well, when I was at NOV, certainly I would tell you that I spent most of my time at NOV working with my people, working with the teams, either developing or trying to improve what we were doing as an organization, and I spent some time with our products. But the value that the OEMs or the manufacturers produce are generally products, where you build a product or a system or a package, you sell it to a customer, and you provide after sales service. But you're really not selling people; you're actually selling iron. As a pure service provider like Precision, we actually don't sell. We don't transfer products. We actually provide a rig. We provide people. We make sure the rig works properly. We make sure the people are well trained. So we're actually making money and selling what people do every day. So it's a slightly different model. But what I find is my time here is about the same as it was at NOV, where probably 70% of my time is spent around developing people, training people, making sure they understand the strategy, and making sure that they're all going the same direction. So in fact, my job isn't much different here than what it was at NOV. It is really trying to get people to be trained, competent, confident, and enjoy their jobs and be part of the organization.
How do you help make sure that, so you talked about, making sure people are aligned with the strategy. How do you help practically and maybe even tactically make sure that everyone is aligned? Because being geographically, spread out can have its challenges. I know, any institution, I don't care what industry, that's a huge challenge, is making sure that, what, to your comments earlier, what you're thinking about from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep. I mean, it's very important because you're trying to drive the organization forward. So how do you help translate those things and make sure that everyone's kind of reading from the same, piece of music, so to speak?
Yeah. So as we built out our strategy and our tactics, a decade ago, we involved large parts of the organization to build the strategy, to build our tactics, how we're going to utilize the skills we have, what skills we need to add. We had large groups of people involved in that. But that strategy, our core strategy of how we create value and how we develop and train our people, how we build and structure our rigs, the business systems we use, it really comes under three umbrellas: having well-trained, well-skilled people, having the right types of business systems and leveraging our scale, and having really high-quality rig assets. That strategy hasn't changed in well over half a decade. So, the organization's well aligned. They understand our super spec rigs. They understand our people strategy. They understand our system strategy. So I think we've got a very good team. Now, I guess the other thing I'd say is that 2020 being a really tough year, we certainly went through a huge downsizing. A lot of really great people in Precision retired early. Others were asked to leave to help the company downsize. The industry as a whole has lost a lot of people. But in Precision, everybody left here kind of knows the drill, they know what we're doing, they know our strategy, they know where they fit in. So I think it's part of the cyclic nature of our business, but certainly you could attribute it to half a decade of really intense strategic work and another half decade of execution around that plan. Long answer, but not a short answer on that one.
Well, I mean, and for the level of impact and criticality that has, I think that answer was spot on. So no, it's good. I'll kind of back up here. I don't know if
I got one more for Kevin. I don't know. It's been brought up, the private versus public company in these times. Which one are you in favor of, or what are the pros and cons of being either in these times?
There's no right answer here. I think there's different answers. So being a private company, certainly you don't have to worry about quarterly reports to the public that doesn't really know your strategy that well.
Yeah.
As a private company, you've got a private company board, you've got a limited group of owners, they probably understand your strategy. Certainly they care about quarterly earnings, but they're not focused on trying to understand the strategy. They know it.
Yeah.
Except I would tell you that broadly, the cost of capital is higher in a private equity environment than it is in a public market.
Sure.
The public markets are designed to lower the cost of capital for businesses to grow quickly.
Yeah.
In an industry which is capital intensive, like oil and gas, and especially oil and gas land drilling, every new rig is $25 million and maintenance costs are high. Having low cost capital is important. So for our model, it's no question being a public company is at an advantage. There are times in a cycle when it's painful, like right now when valuations are so low, but there'll be times when the valuations are appropriate, and there'll be odd times when the valuations are a bit too high.
Yeah.
But we'll ride those cycles. I think in general, that lower cost of capital is important when you have capital intensive industries.
Mm-hmm.
It's good perspective.
Yeah.
Not at a single point in this podcast did I feel that anything other than great answers to questions. I tell you, this is extremely enlightening, and it's great to have your insight and perspective over here.
Yep. Well, great. Yeah.
Really appreciate being on today. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Kevin. And I think I speak for everyone when I say thanks for joining us, and for our viewers, thanks for watching and for listening. And we will talk to you next time.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.
Thank you.